Hey, it's Sam, and I'm here with the 5th video in the Astrology Axis series, and as you can see behind me, it says priority and sequence. That's the next spoke in the wheel, and as you see on the mind map, I'm going to be going over the things there which, has to do with karma's ripening and things like Viparit yogas and a few sort of complicated things, and what allows us to tell results, the what and the why. And so very deep stuff in this video. You want to watch this all the way to the end because you're going to start to see a lot of the things that I've already talked about with the universal principles and the frameworks of planet signs and houses, and then aspects, yogas, harmonic charts, nakshatras, and all other things, transits, all kind of brought into a sort of priority and sequence, a kind of a structure. So before I get to that, though, I just wanted to make sure that you also know that we've opened registration for the course upcoming, and this is a time when people wait each year. This is like a few weeks to a month at the most when people can actually register for the upcoming semester. And people each year, like you, are kind of wondering, why should I take a course? I'm just watching your videos, it's cool. Why do you keep talking about your course? Well, the reason is because it really allows you to understand not just the stuff I'm teaching, off and on to help you learn a little bit more about, the details, but astrology, the study, is the study of your connection with the divine, with the cosmos. And as it says at the beginning, those who don't understand Jyotish, the Brahmins or the educated people that don't understand Jyotish, are somewhat blind. And so, astrology answers those fundamental questions that you have about why you're here and why anything is here, and what's the meaning behind the things that happen in your life. And again, you're obviously very passionate about it, and you have a lot of interest in it, and it's probably something that's deeply connected to your heart. You love it, but you think to yourself, it's not sensible that I would study it, and I'm not going to be an astrologer. I'm not that good, or this or that. These are all limiting beliefs, because I will tell you that people just like you each year step outside themselves a little bit, they take a chance, and they actually try it, and they see the course, and they're so happy they did. Because, again, not only are you going to learn something that is going to benefit you for the rest of your life and everything else that you do, but understand this: if you apply what you're taught, you can make the money back in like readings and stuff like that. Plenty of people have done it. There are many people who have, after studying and having me answer all their questions and going back and forth on the forums and on the calls and all the courses, they start doing readings, and they do them very well. You're going to be very well trained and make the money back in the course 5-10 times over. So again, I'm not making any promises about that. This is a disclaimer, because you might just get the course and just enjoy it and never do anything. So, but I'm saying is that if you have the ambition and the desire to really want to change people's lives with it, this course will definitely help you do it. And it's different than other courses, I know, because I've taken other courses. Other astrology certification courses, they give you all the details, and you memorize all the details. You memorize all this stuff, and then you take a test to see how much you memorized. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's useful. You have to memorize a lot of stuff. But this course is not only the memorization, but it's the mastery. And this is why I'm unfolding all of these things in a sensible way in these videos, so you can actually see it. Because you should expect that if you study something and you pay money for something, that it's not just a bunch of details thrown at you, but they're organized. They're organized into a system that allows you to start from some place and wind up at a place that is deep, and that is holistic, and that allows you to actually not just gather a lot of information, but also make sense of it and actually practice it. So the course is based on practice, not just on gathering a lot of information, because you've done enough of that, as you've heard me talk about in these videos so far, and I'm going to do quite a bit of it today as well. And by the way, the thing, just to finish that, is you want to register as soon as you can. Okay, if you are thinking about it, you should do it and not wait too long. So as we see this behind me, I just want to talk about a few things that are related to this priority and sequence. When you hear this, when you see this priority and sequence, what I'm talking about is taking all of that information that you gather and, first of all, doing things in the right order and realizing that everything is not as important as everything else. So I've used a couple examples since we started about, about engineering success, okay? Engineering success, like you've learned how to engineer success in eating. I said at the very beginning, you live near a food source. If your goal and your outcome is to eat, you've made sure you're near a food source so you can deal with those principles, and when you want to eat, then the strategy or the technique is to walk to the refrigerator and take some food and eat it. This accounts for a whole lot of things that you make sure to have it handled. And again, when I want to get an astrology answer or someone asks me a question, I can do that just as simply as you can make sure to eat, because I've studied it and my students have also studied it. So when someone asks them a question, they know how to get the answer just as reliably. Priority and sequence is kind of like, let's say after you've gone to the refrigerator and now you want to actually make something, let's say like an omelet, you have to do things in the right order, okay? And everything's not as important as everything else. So if you want to make an omelet, you need to have a pan, you need to have a stove or a food source, let's say a stove, a food source, a pan, hopefully something like some oil so that the egg doesn't stick to the pan. You have to have an egg, and then maybe, let's say, salt and pepper. And again, all things aren't equal, and everything isn't just done in any random sequence. So if you just crack the egg and put it on the stove and there's no pan there, you're not going to get an egg, you're going to get a mess. Or if you, take some butter and put it in a pan and then you just kind of set it on the counter and then you turn on the stove and crack an egg, again, you have to do things in the right order. And everything's not as important as everything else. First of all, if you're going to eat eggs, you need to have an egg. So that's more important than a pan or butter or whatever, because you can have a pan and butter and whatever and eat something else like, tofu or chicken. But if you want an omelet, you need an egg. That's more important. So again, priority and sequence is a very important thing, and all things are not equal. Very important concept. Intelligence versus results is another very important concept. We tend to be confused by the idea that how come this good thing isn't good all the time? Like, for instance, exalted, simple thing, or debilitated, bad thing, good thing, bad thing, gross categories. We love gross categories because we don't have to think. We just judge it. We judge it as good and bad, then we don't have to think. It shortcuts thinking and intelligence. Remember, the enemy of intelligence is judging things. I'm not saying judgment, because judgment and discrimination are often put in the same category, but I'm saying judging something. We shouldn't be judging information, okay? Discrimination is when we understand the difference, and that's what intelligence comes from, and results. So we might get something that we don't like, or we might not get something and we're okay with it, for example. Like an exalted planet that produces something confusing or painful. These are the kinds of things that made me start actually really researching and led to my first book, The Ascendant, because I started noticing that, I'm taught that this is good, and I heard teachers go crazy about how good something is. And then I'd look in a chart and say, but how come in this chart, when this person ran this dasha or this thing, it's not good at all? And so I had to start looking deeper. You want to understand, intelligence comes mainly from things like dignity and character traits and a lot of subtleties that show intelligence and strong character. And results come from yogas, which have mainly to do with what planets rule, and then the results are activated at a certain time based on the timing factors. So again, you might have something that looks really powerful, but it never manifests because you never get the dasha. And the dasha very specifically of what rules it. Dashas don't just appear somehow. There's very specific rules. So, and then resolving contradictions. Again, this is all a part of priority and sequence because we have things mixed up. If, we either have things in the wrong order or we have them in no order at all. If you're just gathering a lot of information, then probably the information is not in any order. You're just pulling something out and going, what's this? I'm confused. I thought this was that. if you're not taking it in the right context, it's like saying, what's wrong? I cracked the egg on the stove. Why isn't it an omelet? Well, because there's more to it than that. So resolving contradiction and beyond good and bad are very similar. First of all, you want to understand this. There are no contradictions. There's no contradiction in astrology. None. And you might be like, well, what are you talking about? What if the Rashi chart says this and the harmonic chart says that? Or it's exalted but it's retrograde, and it's a functional benefic but it's a natural malefic, and it's this and that. Those are all contradictions. What do they mean? The reason they appear to be a contradiction to you is because you're putting them in categories of good and bad. It's very simple. It's just one version. It's just a different version of good, bad, good, bad, good, bad. So what is it? Good or bad? Again, you don't hear it that way, but I do. I hear it like there's a good thing and a bad thing and a good thing and a bad thing and a good thing and a bad thing, so is it good or bad? That's basically what the question is. Astrology shows what happens in life. Have you ever noticed that everything in life is a mixture of good and bad? How surprising is it to you that astrology is also going to show that mixture of good and bad? Right? So again, just to sort of play around a little bit, but astrology shows all the complexity. There's no contradiction, though. There's no contradiction between the planet as a natural malefic, but a functional benefic, debilitated, but forming a yoga, aspected by a malefic, but retrograde. There's no contradiction in those things. All of them are separate. They're separate categories. The natural quality of the planet is a totally separate thing from the yogas that it forms. And it's totally separate from its functional status, totally separate from the house it rules and what it produces. They're totally different categories, like they don't have nothing to do with each other. Like Saturn as a natural malefic, but a functional benefic for, let's say, Taurus. It's the same planet, but the categories are like completely separate. Saturn is always a natural malefic simply because it allows us to do things that are cruel, and it has a nature of intensity to it, but that allows us to do that. It's just always like that. That's just its nature. There's no good or bad about it. Even the word that it's malefic doesn't mean it's bad. There's no judgment. It's just a nature. Just like the nature of fire is to burn. It's not bad. It's bad if it burns your skin. It's not bad if it cooks your food. There is no judgment. It's not bad when Saturn gives you the determination to persevere and make something amazing happen because you're willing to overcome the problems. It's not, it's not good when it does that, and then bad when it makes you aware of all your problems. It's neither one. It's just its nature. Okay? And then you assess that and how that energy comes and is related to a specific person based on the ascendant. Like for Taurus, that energy, that perseverance and willingness to work hard, rules the 9th and 10th houses. So that energy for them is easy. For Leo, it's very hard because they're not about perseverance and struggle, and they want things to be Leo-like. So again, it's just a stop, and they have nothing to do with each other as far as one good, one bad. There's no good or bad in it. And whether or not it forms a yoga or not has to do with, there's no contradiction in if it forms a yoga or like what kind of powerful yoga or difficult yoga it forms, and whether it's retrograde or this or that. They all show different things. They're all little different categories. And the reason it appears to be contradiction is because you're putting things in gross categories. You're judging them. We shouldn't judge the information. Don't judge the information. And again, we judge the information because we get overwhelmed by the complexity. The reason I broke all that down in the early videos is that's where you see the complexity. When you're just judging things in these gross categories, it's because you haven't learned, you haven't started from the beginning. When you start from the beginning, then you're not in some gross category and in over your head. So the reason you think those things is because you haven't learned what the guna actually means. You think, oh, okay, the Tamasic one, that's one of the bad ones, and it's a Tamasic one, it's a bad one, okay? So I know that's bad, and I know that's bad, so why are you saying it's good? I thought Tamas was bad. These are the kind of questions that I get, right? How can Jupiter be bad? How can Sattva ever be bad? Sattva's the good one, right? Again, this judgment, good, bad. I'm confused because I heard it was good, and you're saying it can be bad. It's just... And you start compiling that, start adding layers of complexity on that. And is it any wonder why you don't know what you're doing? Is it any wonder why it's so confusing by the time you start looking at charts? When you start from the beginning and you unfold it from the beginning, then you really understand what each guna means, what each element means, what all those principles come and when they stack together, what the dignity means, what the unfolding of consciousness means, how each one of these things unfolds consciousness through the guna, through the element, through the sign, through the nakshatra, through the house. And then how the aspect shares that. And you're building power, you're building wisdom. So then by the time you start actually trying to work with it, you're not working with it from some place that's so disconnected, which comes down to this going high versus going deep. You need to start with the depth. And anything, when I say going high, I mean going into some high, subtle technique and some complicated technique. There are times when you need to do that to do more specific work. But if you're just confused and you're seeing all this contradiction in good and bad, even on the basic level, you don't want to jump to some complicated technique for the answer. This is what people tend to do. They tend to think, oh, I understand all the planets and signs and houses. I know all that stuff. But there's this thing. What about this Raja Yoga, this retrograde thing with Ketu in the 8th house and in the Navamsha? That's where it's really at. That's what I really need to learn. No, you don't. That's something very subtle. That's like the little bit of salt and paprika on the omelet to give it that last flavor, often. So knowing when to go high and when to go deep, and knowing that you need to start with the depth and then evolve toward the higher, more subtle realms. So again, this is what I do in the course. The whole course is about unfolding these things in a systematic order so that you're not overwhelmed and you're not just reaching for judgments because you're having a hard time managing the complexity of the actual information and of the knowledge. So astrology is a combination between Mercury and Jupiter, inspiring the knowledge, keeping in mind the bigger picture, keeping in mind all of those evolutionary principles, and staying grounded and practical in every little detail, and understanding that you need to build those details up from the bottom up. This is why Mercury rules that earth element, every little detail, right? Mercury rules that earth element, the most grounded, and Jupiter rules the ether element, the most abstract. So even in the Pancha Mahabhutas, the 5 great compounds, Mercury rules the earth, which is the most down to earth, and Jupiter rules the space. And astrology is where the space and the earth come together. The most abstract and cosmic and the most literal. So, very powerful stuff. Now I'll get to going over this mind map so you can see the specifics of the priority and sequence that I have laid out on the mind map. So on the mind map you see it says priority and sequence, and there's a few initial spokes: the ratio of importance, karma's ripening, Nichabanga, Viparit yogas, and results versus meaning. And so again, these are a few categories that I've put the concept of priority and sequence. I've sort of roughly grouped them into those labels. And you see with ratio of importance, when we do this ratio of importance and all things aren't equal and we do things in the right order, this helps us overcome the overwhelm. People are overwhelmed. They don't know where to start, right? In the next video, I'm going to give you some chart reading templates that I use, that I give students, that you would get and that you would learn how to utilize to help overcome overwhelm. Because again, what typically happens is people look at the chart and they pull out one thing and act like that's the most important thing, and what happens is you assign the wrong level of priority to it. You make an evaluation of it that's not accurate, not just for itself, but even implicit in all kinds of other things. Oh, the reason I'm depressed is because I have, Jupiter with Mercury in the 3rd house with Rahu or something. It might have nothing to do with why you're depressed. Depression might have nothing to do with that. Depression usually comes from the moon. So again, evaluate things completely wrong because we're pulling at things that aren't in the right order because we're overwhelmed. So again, once you start dealing with the right system and things like the templates and whatnot, the ratio of importance helps you overcome overwhelm. You start at a certain place and put a certain amount of value and weight on that. It's like if you go to the doctor and you have like a sprained finger, and he's looking at your finger and suddenly you have a heart attack. Well, he's going to forget the finger, right? It's the same thing. Everything's not as important. So again, this allows you to use templates and systems that I've put together. Most of my work has been about teaching it better, is teaching and training astrologers professionally on a professional level, not just, here's a certification course where you get a bunch of information, now I'll test you on it. It's to teach you a system that you can take out and use. I'm interested in training astrologers, not just giving you a bunch of information. So again, it allows you to know where to start reading the chart, and all things aren't created equal. Now we have the thing on karma's ripening, the next spoke here. I told you when I was talking about this, intelligence versus results. It's very specific. And again, it's surprising how many astrologers don't know the system of what actually makes results. And it's based on the planets as house rulers, primarily what the planets rule as house rulers in the Rashi chart and as nakshatra rulers if you're using Vimshottri Dasha. And those karmas ripening and what the planets are ruling are based on dashas, subdashas, and also transits, the planets in the sky. Right? So the dashas are what are called static factors. It means your dasha system was set up when you were born. It doesn't change. You don't change your dashas. Okay? No matter what system you're using. Most people use the Vimshottri Dasha system, which is a very good one. I use it just out of simplicity now. It works. Just works. So it was set up when you were born. But then the transits are moving all the time. So static and dynamic factors. This is one of the principles. And again, the priority and the sequence, when to prioritize a static factor and the dynamic factors, how they work within each other. There is no contradiction. Again, people would say, what if the dasha says it's good and then the transit says it's bad? Which is it? Or some version of that. That doesn't exist. Okay? Dashas and transits work as a system. Or another contradiction of good and bad. What if the Rashi chart says this and the Navamsha chart says this? Again, it's not a contradiction. That's showing me that you don't know how to read the chart. You don't understand the ratio of importance between these things. Between Rashi and harmonic charts. They work together always. They never contradict each other because they're not in competition with each other. It's like saying, what if your right hand says this and your left hand says that? Which is right? Well, they're not in competition with each other. They show different parts of your body. So, the static and dynamic factors between dashas and then transits are what you have in these karmas ripening, and it's very specific, and it's done very literally. I have a very literal system that works and allows you to rectify charts and get consistent results like all the time. And it's based on yogas and dignity. Yogas have to do with results. Dignity has to do with intelligence. So again, when I talked about this before, the ratio of importance between what we get and whether or not we enjoy it or don't enjoy it, or it leads us where we're going or obstructs where we really want to go, all of that subtlety is what's shown in the yogas and the dignity. It's the two different parts, basically the dignity. Those factors are what we look at when we look at karma's ripening. And now we have Nichabanga and Viparit yogas. These are a couple other things that we put in the priority and sequence. Again, the Nichabanga reversal of debility. When a planet is debilitated, it tends to modify it, and it adds more subtlety to that indicator. And the Viparit yogas also add more subtlety when you see a difficult ruler in a difficult house. But again, it's very easy to say, it's very easy to just say, well, it's bad, but it's not that bad. I mean, I hear astrologers say this, get up at conferences and teach it like this. Well, but you have, the sixth ruler, sixth house is difficult, it shows struggles, it goes into the eighth house, so it's not so bad because there's this principle that if a difficult house ruler goes into a difficult house, it's not as bad. So you'll feel some of those struggles, but they won't be as bad. I mean, what does that mean? Okay, you have to interpret it correctly. Sixth Lord in the 8th is different than 6th Lord in the 12th, different than 12th Lord in the 6th, 12th Lord in the 8th. different if it's, Jupiter, a functional malefic or benefic. It's different based on what the other houses the planet rules. It's a huge thing. And it needs to be interpreted. So these things, they're not just, well, it's a bad thing, but it's not as bad. That's typically the way it gets interpreted. But when to bring that in and how much importance to put on it is very, is very meaningful. With Anicca and with Viparit yogas, I mention these because they come in at a certain point in the sequence. And then, the overall category of results versus meaning, which I kind of have up here, intelligence and results. Look at the top thing there, distinction between what and why. I mean, this just nails the whole spectrum of what we need to do and why I decided to start training astrologers, frankly. Because it turns into this just silly exercise in what's going to happen, am I going to get it, am I not going to get it, this fortune-telling thing with no expansion on why or what the real process is going on. And even when it gets into the good and so much one-dimensionality. So isn't it important if you get something or don't get something, why it's happening, like what is going on in the person and why? And again, realize this is the subtlety of life, and astrology shows it and gives so much opportunity to explain the evolutionary process behind everything that's happening. This is what I train astrologers to do. I train my students to understand why the thing is happening. Seeing what it is not hard. It's going to produce what it produces based on the houses it rules, where it goes, its nature. Whether or not you get the prediction like, oh, you're going to actually, get the girlfriend and then you lose the girlfriend in a year and a half, those things are secondary. What's more important is that you unfold the consciousness and the karmic development behind all of these things. This is what people want to learn. This is what people want to know when they get a reading. They don't always know that. They ask me because they want me to make all these predictions. But then once we start the reading, what they really want to know is, why am I so confused? This is really the one question everybody has. Why am I confused? Why is this confusing to me? Not, am I going to get it or not? That's underneath it all. Or, what should I do? They don't want me to tell them what to do. If I just sit there and go, you should do this, it's not going to be helpful. If we go through, well, you're doing this because of this, and we get into why they're confused and what parts of themselves are in competition with the other, what inner conflicts are getting activated during this karmic cycle, this is enormously helpful for them. It's empowering. It's you empowering the universal energy in them. And you can do that. You can do that. You can learn how to do it. Just like you can go to college to learn how to be an architect. Colleges have vetted curriculum and material that if it's junky material, they don't teach it. So they know how to teach architecture now. And I've put that same rigorous standards into my course. You can learn how to do it no matter what your background. Look at this. Look at the testimonials. It works. The course itself is not on trial anymore. It works. It gets improved, but it will definitely teach you how it works and then how to actually speak about it and help people. So this distinction between what and why and results versus meaning is huge. And again, just to break that down more, why difficult things still give to us. We act like we don't want anything to be difficult, but how come some difficulties teach us more than anything else, and it's the best thing that ever happened to us? But sometimes we get and desire the wrong thing. Again, that's the interplay between intelligence and results. Many times, or, like I said earlier, I would see where exalted planets produced things that were wrong for the person. Because the functional nature of the planet is just as important as its natural status. And the other things that influence it is just as important. Like, let's say, exalted Venus for Leo. Okay? Leo for Venus is a functional malefic. I'm sorry, Venus for Leo is a functional malefic because it rules the third house of desires. It's exalted in the 8th house of destruction and taking things away and transformation. And again, Venus are things that we want, like relationships, and it gets us into things like sexuality and involvement with people and changing and transformation and desire and ups and downs and drama. It's a hard energy, let's say, for a Leo, as an example. So you see the complexity of all that. So what's more important? If someone like that is in, let's say they're in the Venus Dasha or the Jupiter Dasha, which would be ruling that Venus, and they say, should I marry this person or not? And you're like, yeah, you should marry them. What's more important, that you make that prediction or that you explain that, why they're like torn between, you know, why they're all sexually out of whack and wanting this? What's more important, that you make that prediction or that you help the person understand why they're totally confused and getting pulled in directions that don't feel congruent with their deeper nature? Because that's what it comes down to, those qualities of Dharma. Again, this goes back to the first videos. Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha. The Dharma planets for Leo are Sun, Mars, and Jupiter. The other planets tend to disrupt. They tend to be disruptive. As an example, so you have these principles that are all pervasive. And the yogas bring those things into existence. This is when you see we start doing things that are congruent with our Dharma and with our purpose and with our nature, or things that distract, and the mixture of the two, because they're always mixing. So again, these kinds of subtleties and complexity you'll never learn if you don't understand those principles first, and you don't understand how to put things in the right order and the right priority, and understand why the person is desiring the wrong thing. And to, you know, it's not wrong like in a judgment, but realizing this is why you're in this place of confusion. For example, you would explain it to the person and be like, okay, and then you help them elevate it. Because the highest quality of the planet is always there. Highest quality of Venus is devotion, compassion, not stimulation and fulfilling our personal desires. Like I said in the first video, when I talked about the gunas and unfolding each planet and the consciousness of each planet. Venus, remember, through the body, mind, spirit. So when we get confused, it tends to get pulled down into the body first. And then we get involved emotionally through the body, but we're trying to evolve the higher consciousness of something. So confusion winds up being, again, it's very much a standard kind of realm through which we're evolving our confused state and through which difficulties manifest. So again, these are all things that we go through in the course over and over again of what's the evolutionary process. It's one of my deep, deep teachings, the evolutionary process, because evolution is a principle. It's a spiritual principle. And how do we evolve? Through the gunas, another principle, through the elements, based on our karma and dharma, the truth. These things are immutable laws of the universe. And this is why I started with them in these videos. You don't start with them and then abandon them once you start looking at a chart. And again, this is what happens with astrology often. We learn all these yogic principles and then we start looking at a chart and it all seems to just fly out the window. Like, where did all that go? Where was all this God and this oneness? Now we're looking at astrology chart and there's no oneness anymore. Now it's just all these planets out to get me, right? That doesn't work. So again, results versus meaning, priority and sequence, going back to the evolutionary principles we started with. We never abandon them. They're folded into everything. And so the course is that kind of immersion. And so this is what makes us sometimes, get and desire the wrong thing when we get planets that are either in low dignity or they're functional malefics, and the benefit of not getting what we want. Again, that's another thing that happens. I'm so glad that certain things didn't happen to me, particularly when I was younger, and I really wanted that girlfriend, and I really wanted that musical career, and I think of a couple times when I wanted some things and they didn't pan out, and at the time I was like, oh, hurting, and then later I was like, boy, I'm really glad that never happened. I'm really glad that never happened, because that would have sent me on another direction that would have changed things dramatically. So there's a lot to consider, and you want to understand that astrology is never outside of life. And anytime you find yourself shortcutting and short-circuiting complexity and the beauty and the subtle mix of good and bad, and the subtle mix of those energies, the subtle complexity of, powerful and detrimental forces, and you want to shortcut that with some judgment, you're not getting the true answer, because life is a mixture of beauty and effort and difficulty and glory, and everything is a mixture of those things. And astrology shows it. So every placement is complex. There's nothing in a chart that's easy. Everything has enormous complexity. Every placement. This is again why when I get questions like, well, I have Jupiter in Pisces, what does that mean? Or whatever it is. Or I have Jupiter in the 3rd house, and I'm not like that, or something. It's like, it's just not enough information, right? You don't know what ascendant, you don't know what the dignity is, you don't know if there's aspects, you don't know what the nakshatra is, so many things. Everything is a mixture of many different qualities, and building that ratio of priority and sequence after we've gone through the other things, after we've understood the principles, organized them, and really understood them. And we continue to go back and re-understand them. As we get into case studies, which I'm going to do in the next video, we keep elevating and evolving these principles ourselves. Because once you then start looking at charts and investigating and not looking at your chart so much, or the charts of your boyfriend, or whatever it is, once you get out of this myopic world, and astrology is no longer this thing that you're hoping is going to help you win somehow, conquer the universe and win, and it starts being about this remarkable opening to cosmic wisdom, then it changes. And so this is why in these videos I talk like this, because I realize that many people that listen to these videos are like, and believe me, I see their comments, you're so full of crap and you think you just know everything, and why don't you just get to the point, and you keep lecturing about your course, or whatever it is, or you keep telling us we're stupid or acting like that. First of all, I'm not doing that. I hope it never comes off that way. But I admit I'm a little in your face about how if you don't study this, you're not going to learn it. Again, you want to, and it's not because I'm mean or anything, I'm talking to the people that are interested right now. I'm talking to the people who would really maybe be interested in learning, not just people who want to keep getting some candy. And there's plenty of candy here as well. But I'm talking to people who actually want to separate themselves, want to actually learn and, change the world, because the world needs it. And I've put a lot of time into learning how to teach this, and to teach it more and show up in service to those who want to take it to the next level. And so that's why I talk like this, and I just want to let you see that the difference between what it really is and maybe what you think it is, and frankly what you think you are, might shock you. Again, go to the page and read the comments of people who have gone through the course. And by the way, I could have 10 times the testimonials. I haven't even gathered testimonials for the last 3 years because it takes a while. But, there could be 5 times as many. And so it's a life-changing program, because you connect with this whole transformational, learning model with a bunch of other students. So anyway, look for the next video, and where I'll be talking about case studies and research and how to do those kinds of things that start to take astrology beyond just your life and your world and your friends and your boyfriend, and start to take it to the next level.